The loneliest towns in America are not ghost towns because ghost towns are finished, and these places are not finished yet. People still wake up here, still open the door every morning, still drive the same roads they have been driving for decades, even though most of the people they used to pass on those roads are gone now. One of these towns delivers mail by mule because there is no road. One of them made cell phones illegal by federal law. And one of them has a population of exactly one woman who runs the bar, the library, and the entire government by herself. These are 10 towns where staying behind became a way of life. Number 10, Marfa. On search Marfa, Texas on Google Maps, and you will find it in the middle of West Texas, about 200 miles southeast of El Paso, with a population just under 2001, blinking stoplight surrounded by nothing but desert in every direction. Marfa was a water stop on the railroad in the 1880s and should have died when the train stopped needing water. But instead, it became one of the strangest towns in America after minimalist artist Donald Judd moved here in the 1970s and built a 340-acre outdoor art museum in the desert. On Highway 90, about 26 miles outside town, there is a building that looks exactly like a Prada store with glass windows and luxury handbags on display. But it is not a real store because it is an art installation that cost $120,000 to build, and you cannot go inside and nobody works there. So it just sits alone on the highway surrounded by tumbleweeds. And then there are the Marfa lights, which people have been reporting since the 1880s. Mysterious glowing orbs that appear over the desert at night, bouncing and splitting apart and joining together and disappearing before anyone can explain what they are. The town even built an official viewing platform where people sit in the dark, watching the desert hoping to see lights that might not be real. Homes here range from $150,000 to $400,000, which is expensive for a town with one stoplight, where the nearest grocery store is over an hour away. But people pay it because Marfa offers mystery lights nobody can explain and a fake Prada store nobody can enter. Only in Texas. But if Marfa is strange, the next town has the funniest origin story in all of Alaska. Number 9, Chicken. I search Chicken, Alaska on Google Maps, and you will find a population somewhere between 7 and 12 depending on the season sitting on the Taylor Highway in eastern Alaska, about 80 miles south of the Canadian border. Here is why this town is called Chicken. In the early 1900s, gold miners wanted to name it ptarmigan after the local bird. But the problem was nobody could agree on how to spell ptarmigan, so they just named it Chicken instead. And that is the real story. The entire identity of this town exists because a group of miners could not spell a bird's name. Today, Chicken has a gift shop, a saloon, a few cabins, and not much else with gold mining still happening on a small scale in the area. And the Taylor Highway is unpaved for most of its length and closes entirely in winter, which means when the road closes, Chicken is completely cut off with no way in or out except by air. In summer, tourists ride through on motorcycles and RVs, heading to or from Dawson City in Canada. But in winter, the population drops to nearly zero with no cell service, no hospital, and the nearest real town being Tok, about 75 miles west. Homes here are essentially cabins or mining claims because you are not buying a house in Chicken. You are buying a lifestyle that includes no internet, no paved roads, and a town name that makes every piece of mail you receive look like a joke. A town named after a spelling mistake in the middle of Alaska with 7 people and they still have a gift shop. And if that is not peak American optimism, I do not know what is. But the next town is not funny at all because something has been burning underneath it for over 60 years. Number 8, Centralia. Search Centralia, Pennsylvania on Google Maps, and you will see a small patch of land in Columbia County, in the coal region where exactly 5 human beings still live. In 1962, a fire started in an underground coal mine beneath the town, and whether it was a trash burn that spread or a mine fire never fully extinguished, it reached the coal seams and has never stopped burning for over 60 years, spreading through miles of tunnels beneath the town. Steam and smoke still rise from cracks in the ground, and the road through town, Route 61, was eventually closed because the asphalt buckled and split open from the heat below, and you can still see that abandoned highway covered in graffiti with smoke drifting out of cracks. So in 1984, a 12-year-old boy nearly fell into a sinkhole that opened beneath his feet in his own backyard as hot steam and carbon monoxide poured from the hole. The government offered to relocate residents and most accepted, but 5 did not, and they still live above a fire that scientists estimate will continue burning for another 250 years. The video game and movie Silent Hill were both inspired by Centralia, and you cannot buy property here because the government bought most of the land. But the 5 remaining residents have been granted the right to stay until they die or choose to leave. Picture this. You walk down a cracked road in rural Pennsylvania where steam rises from the earth beneath your feet, and the town around you is empty because 5 people live here, above a fire that started before most of your parents were born, and will still be burning when your grandchildren are old. From fire beneath the ground to a town that cannot decide which country it belongs to. Number 7. Hyder. Search Hyder, Alaska on Google Maps, and you will find about 87 people living in a town that is technically in Alaska, but cannot be reached by road from anywhere else in Alaska, because the only road into Hyder comes through Stewart, British Columbia, in Canada, which means you literally drive through another country to get to this American town. Because of this arrangement, Hyder runs on Canadian currency, and the phone area code is Canadian, and the time zone follows British Columbia, not Alaska, and many residents do their grocery shopping in Stewart across the border, while the power is supplied from Canada, not from the Alaska grid. There is no U.S. customs station, so people cross back and forth between the two countries casually and daily without anyone checking. Hyder calls itself the friendliest ghost town in Alaska, and the American flag flies over a town that economically and logistically operates as part of Canada. Grizzly bears and black bears walk through town regularly, and there are bear viewing platforms nearby where you can watch brown bears fish for salmon because the bears do not know where the border is, and honestly, nobody really polices it anyway. See, homes range from $30,000 to $80,000, which is cheap by any standard, but your grocery store is in another country, your hospital is in another country, and your phone thinks you are in another country, which makes Hyder an American town that forgot it is American with 87 people living in a beautiful identity crisis between two nations. And if you think fitting a town into one country is hard, the next one fits an entire town into one building. Number 6. Whittier. Search Whittier, Alaska on Google Maps, and you will find it on the Kenai Peninsula, about 60 miles southeast of Anchorage, with a population of around 272 people, and almost every single one of them lives in one building called Begich Towers, a 14-story former Army barracks built in the 1950s that contains apartments, a post office, a general store, a laundromat, a church, a police station, a bed and breakfast, and a school playground connected by tunnel. The only way into Whittier is through the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, which is one lane through a mountain and shared with trains on a scheduled basis. And if you miss the last opening, you are stuck until morning because once that tunnel closes, the town is sealed. Whittier gets over 200 inches of snow per year, with wind gusts hitting 60 miles per hour, an avalanche risk that never really goes away. Apartments in Begich Towers sell for $50,000 to $100,000, and a 2-bedroom for $70,000 sounds like a dream, until you realize your 271 neighbors are not optional because you will see them in the hallway and the store and the laundromat and the church every single day with no way to avoid anyone since there is only one building and one tunnel. Picture this. You drive through a mountain, literally through it, one lane with your headlights on for several minutes of tunnel, and then you come out the other side, where a single 14-story building stands at the edge of the water surrounded by glaciers, and that is the town. All of it. 272 people. One building, one tunnel, one life. And if one building feels claustrophobic, the next town has the opposite problem because there is nothing left at all. Number 5. Indianola. Search Indianola, Texas on Google Maps in Calhoun County on the Gulf Coast, and you will see a beach, maybe a historical marker, and nothing else because there are no buildings, no streets, and no town, since Indianola does not exist anymore, even though it used to be the second largest port in Texas. In the mid-1800s, Indianola rivaled Galveston as thousands of German, Polish, and other European immigrants entered Texas through this port, and the town had hotels, warehouses, businesses, and a growing population of over 5,000 people. Then on September 16, 1875, a massive hurricane devastated Indianola and destroyed 3/4 of the buildings and killed hundreds of people, but the survivors rebuilt because they believed in this place and put it back together piece by piece. Then on August 19, 1886, a second hurricane hit, and this one was worse, destroying everything that remained. And this time nobody rebuilt because the entire city was abandoned and the county seat was moved inland, and the second largest port in Texas simply vanished from the map. Art today there is nothing at Indianola except a historical marker on an empty beach where you can stand where 5,000 people once lived and see only sand and water and a sign that says something used to be here. Two hurricanes in 11 years erased a city, and Texas never tried to bring it back, which might be the loneliest fact on this entire list. Not that everyone left, but that nobody ever came back. From a city that disappeared to a town with only one person left. Number 4. Monowi. Search Monowi, Nebraska on Google Maps, where the population is just one human being named Elsie Eiler, who is simultaneously the mayor, the clerk, the treasurer, the bartender, and the librarian. Monowi once had over 150 residents back in the 1930s, but farms mechanized and young people left, and the population drained out one family at a time over 6 decades until only Elsie and her husband Rudy remained. Rudy died in 2004 after building a library of 5,000 books that he donated to the town, and Elsie keeps that library open in his memory while also running the Monowi Tavern serving burgers and cold beer. She grants herself a liquor license every year and pays taxes to herself to keep the streetlights on for a town where she is the only voter, the only taxpayer, and the only citizen. If Elsie leaves or passes away, then Monowi ceases to exist as an incorporated town because the entire legal identity of a community rests on one woman's decision to stay. Or land near Monowi is nearly free, but the nearest grocery is 40 minutes away with no cell service and no broadband, and your only neighbor being a woman in her 80s, who has been running a bar, a library, and a government completely alone for over 20 years. Picture this. You drive across the Nebraska plains where everything is flat and empty until a sign appears that says Monowi Population 1, and you walk into the tavern where Elsie serves you a burger and a beer, and you realize you are sitting in a town where one woman is the entire economy, the entire government, and the entire social life, and that is not loneliness. That is a level of strength most people will never understand. From one person to a place where thousands were sent and never came back. Number 3. Kalaupapa. Search Kalaupapa, Hawaii on Google Maps on Molokai Island, and you will see a small flat peninsula at the base of sea cliffs that rise over 3,000 feet, which are some of the tallest sea cliffs on Earth. In 1866, the Hawaiian government designated this peninsula as a quarantine colony for people with leprosy, and over the next century more than 8,000 men, women, and children were forcibly taken from their families and exiled here, where they were legally declared dead upon arrival. Children were ripped from parents and spouses were separated, and all of them were sent to a cliff surrounded by ocean and walls of rock with no way to leave. Father Damien, a Belgian priest, arrived in 1873 to care for the patients and eventually contracted leprosy himself and died on the peninsula in 1889 before being made a saint. Or the isolation law was not repealed until 1969, and by then generations of patients had lived and died on this peninsula. Today, fewer than 10 former patients remain, with the oldest being 100 years old and still driving and still riding an exercise bike every day. You cannot buy property in Kalaupapa, and access is restricted to guided tours only at $625 per person, with a maximum of 8 visitors allowed per tour. When the last patient dies, the settlement's future will be decided by government agencies currently debating what comes next. Over 1,200 marked graves and thousands of unmarked ones cover the peninsula. Because Kalaupapa is not lonely because of geography, it is lonely because it was designed to be, built to separate the sick from the healthy and the unwanted from the wanted, making it the loneliest place in America not by accident, but by law. From heartbreak to something that sounds impossible, mail delivered by mule inside the Grand Canyon. Number 2. Supai. Search Supai, Arizona on Google Maps in Coconino County, and you will see a tiny cluster of structures deep inside the Grand Canyon sitting 2,000 feet below the rim. With a population of around 208 people from the Havasupai tribe who have lived here for over 1,000 years, and whose name means people of the blue-green waters. The U.S. Department of Agriculture calls Supai the most remote community in the contiguous United States because there are no roads and no cars, and you can only reach it by hiking 8 miles down switchbacks carved into the canyon wall or by horse or by helicopter. Every piece of mail arrives on the back of a mule, making it the only place in America where the Postal Service still delivers by mule train with 10 to 22 mules making a 16-mile round trip 5 days a week, taking 3 hours down and 5 hours up carrying food, medicine, and supplies. You cannot buy property here because it is sovereign tribal land and your phone will not work, and every item in the store costs more because it arrived by mule. 2 miles past the village are some of the most beautiful waterfalls in America, where turquoise water pours 100 feet into blue-green pools at Havasu Falls, and it looks fake, but it is not. Picture this: 3 hours hiking down a cliff with red rock walls towering until the canyon opens and a village appears with simple buildings and mules in a corral and no cars and no power lines. Yet just a community that has existed here for 1,000 years while America built highways above them. Supai is extraordinary, but the number one town might be even more mind-blowing because in that town your cell phone is not just useless, it is illegal. Number 1. Greenbank. Search Greenbank, West Virginia on Google Maps. In Pocahontas County deep in the Appalachian Mountains, and you will see what looks like any other quiet mountain town. But Greenbank is unlike anywhere else in America because here, your cell phone does not work. Not because of bad signal, but because the federal government made it illegal. Greenbank is home to the world's largest fully steerable radio telescope, which is so sensitive it can detect signals from billions of light years away, but only if the area around it is completely free of radio interference. So the Federal Communications Commission created the National Radio Quiet Zone, and in Greenbank the restrictions are the strictest, meaning no cell phones, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no wireless internet, and no microwave ovens because they emit radio waves. And if you use a device that creates interference, a government truck will show up at your door, because this is not a suggestion. It is federal law. Residents live without the technology that defines modern life using landline phones, wired internet where available, and face-to-face conversation instead of screens. Some people moved here specifically because of the ban, including parents who wanted their children growing up without phones, and people who simply wanted the noise to stop. Homes range from $80,000 to $200,000 and you get mountains, silence, and stars at night that look like someone spilled glitter across the sky because there is zero light pollution and zero electronic interference. Picture this: you drive into Greenbank on a fall evening and reach for your phone to take a photo of the glowing mountains, but there is no signal. So you put the phone down and look with your actual eyes while the telescope rises above the trees as the largest moving structure on land in the world. The loneliest town in America is not lonely because of distance or desert. It is lonely because the thing that connects 330 million Americans was banned here, and 150 people live inside that silence by choice. 10 towns and 10 completely different versions of what loneliness looks like in America. Mystery lights in a Texas desert. A fire that has been burning underground for 60 years. One woman running an entire government by herself. 8,000 people sent to die on a Hawaiian cliff, mail arriving by mule inside the Grand Canyon, and a town where the federal government made your phone illegal. Loneliness here is not one thing because sometimes it is distance, sometimes it is history, and sometimes it is just a choice to live without the noise. Which town would you choose? Comments below. Subscribe. See you in the next one.